The Nintendo Switch has had its share of Japanese games that are just plain weird. We have a mountain of niche fan service games out there. In comes a game that I wanted to play from its name alone. It's not really a fan service game, but it is a very niche Japanese game that is very weird in pretty much every aspect. So let's dive right in. Here is my review of Girls Made Pudding for the Nintendo Switch. With story, this takes place during an apocalypse of seemingly unknown origin. At some point in human history, a disease that was transmitted by eyesight was discovered that led to tens of thousands of deaths worldwide. The plot is centered around Sumimi and Nakomi, two girls that were in a cafe when everyone else seemed to just disappear out of existence. Traveling on a motorcycle, they go around trying to survive and keep from disappearing themselves. It's actually a pretty interesting plot. When you get the lore of what happened, how people are surviving and disappearing, and just how the world reacted to the initial pandemic in a not that different way than the real world initially responded to COVID-19, it's really interesting. Whenever I got into the deep lore conversations with the NPCs that ride with you, I became very invested in the world and everything about it. That is, when I played enough to actually know anything about this world. This game starts by telling you nothing. The characters interact and react to things and you have no idea about anything that's going on. You get no information on the characters, why no one is around, or why they're even traveling on a motorcycle. It's honestly very confusing and hard to grasp at first, but once you start spawning little conversations, it slowly becomes more clear as to what's actually going on. Though the translation for this game is a bit flawed. Lots of words that are misspelled or completely wrong. There were times where the girls referenced the owner of the cafe where they both met as a he and a she in the same conversation. And I'm 99% sure Marine's name in the game was actually supposed to be Marina, even though she is only called Marina in one conversation and immediately changed back to Marine for all of her other events. All of these mistakes are pretty small, but there are a lot of them. But it is a really good story. It dives into some really great thinking pieces regarding its disease and how the apocalypse happened. If the translation were worked on a little bit more and it was put in a more standard visual novel format where things aren't completely out of order, as we will discuss in the next section with how you unlock story events, it would probably be a pretty good visual novel. When it comes to gameplay, this is a driving sort of sim with survival and cooking elements. As you play, you'll be driving on little roads, collecting resources and going into houses, both to loot them for food and to sleep at night. With main progression, this game is all about driving a motorcycle from an isometric angle on the roads of a town and areas around it. You can do this manually or let auto drive do it for you. Your goal is to travel and collect resources to be able to survive and activate story events to learn about what's going on. But this is not what you expect a driving game to be. The driving is really just the catalyst for the story progression, as this game is more of a visual novel than anything else. You'll constantly be triggering what are called stories, conversations between the two characters as you drive. You can trigger these by either visiting locations or cooking meals as you travel. These events are also tied to the driving aspect. There are very few cutscenes that act like normal visual novels where you actually go through dialogue with the buttons and see the different models of the characters around. But in this game, it's tied to the driving aspect. Text only advances, even when you have auto advance enabled, when you're moving the motorcycle. It's a little weird, but it's clearly meant to be a rather relaxing game where you just set the motorcycle to auto drive through the small environments while you watch the story unfold. Even though your auto advance little drive is going to be constantly interrupted when transitioning to new areas and interacting with roadblocks. Speaking of interactions, this is also a survival game. You've got 3 gauges that will deplete as you play the game for hunger, energy, and sanity. Doing anything you have to interact with will deplete one of these gauges. Looting houses will lower energy or sanity depending on the minigame that it has you going through for that particular building. You'll run down on hunger naturally as you move around the world, and there will be lots of roadblocks you'll find, like a bear or snake blocking the road that you have to rev your engine or throw food at to be able to get them to leave. There are lots of these little interactions you will run across, making the game an almost constant balance between interacting and cooking food to replenish your gauges. There's also a nighttime mechanic where you have to find shelter when the night comes. If you manage to find a house or use a tent item that you can gain in various locations, you'll gain a daily reward. This starts with ingredients but will eventually become cooking tools and inventory upgrades so you can carry more with you and make more recipes. If you fail to find shelter, it's not going to end the game, but you won't get a reward for that day, and you need those cooking tools early on. That brings us to the cooking. You'll find ingredients as you traverse the world and loot homes. You'll need to combine these to create recipes that will replenish your gauges. Each recipe replenishes something different, and you'll have to earn cooking tools by passing days to be able to make the more advanced dishes. It's a pretty simple mechanic, as you can just highlight what you want to use and the game will tell you what it makes before you make it, whether it's an actual recipe or mystery food, which is just the game's way of telling you that the real recipe for those ingredients has not unlocked yet. The recipes are also crucial for triggering story conversations. At any given time, you'll have different stories available and you'll need to craft a specific recipe to start it. You also cannot trigger and unlock stories while you're going through another one. If you're currently watching a story play out and you craft, say, a sweet rice ball to unlock the mountain, it won't register, and the game even tells you that cooking during a story will not allow you to unlock a new one until that story is done. This is an interesting but flawed system. The game has a bunch of stories for you to explore, creating a very rich backstory with lore for the game's world, and that's something I really loved. But there's no order to it. The game has 3 main episodes and 2 NPCs that have their own set of 2 chapters, but the game will unlock and throw everything at you. You can unlock episode 3 stories when you're still in episode 1, and I had one of the guest characters' episode 1 events spawning when I had revisited her and was in her episode 2 content. It's rather confusing to know what order to trigger what events. The only thing I'll say is be very careful in what you trigger. My first time through the game, I triggered the episode 3 events before the episode 2 events, and I ended up getting a bad ending, being sent back a bit and having to redo things. All in all, this system works as a laid-back adventure, but it's very repetitive. Once you get the gameplay formula going, you do the same things over and over again. Drive, interact with roadblocks, get food, cook, etc. And there are very few different environments, so you're going to be repeating the same areas a lot as well. Tying this with the fact that the difficulty of this game is pretty much non-existent, with me constantly throwing out resources even after I'd completely upgraded my inventory, makes this a game that you really need to just get into the mindset of just going on autopilot, not even paying attention to the game until those story events happen. The game will last you quite a while too. By the time you finished all of the main story events and completed the game, expect around 10 hours of content. As a bit of a reference, I spent about 53 in-game days before I finished it. Next up is presentation, which there isn't too much to talk about. The game's pretty basic in its presentation, a lot of really simple textures and models, and you know, it looks fine as you're never really gonna zoom in on the models anyways. And audibly, the music is all very serene and calming, making it a great atmosphere for this kind of passive background playing game that you can make it into. When it comes to performance, it plays fine overall. It plays at a stable 30 FPS. I noticed a couple frame dips every once in a while, but nothing I would really call an issue or a problem. So let's move on to battery life. It's pretty standard, with the original and the light models getting about 2 to 3 hours out of Girls Made Pudding, with the V2 and OLED models getting 5 to 6 hours. In conclusion, Girls Made Pudding comes to the Switch bringing a very weird experience, combining visual novels, survival, and a little bit of isometric driving. Now, on the downside, its story is actually pretty good, but is brought down by the translation errors and confusion with you having to wait to get any context and the out-of-order nature of how the main story events work. Tying that with the repetition of the gameplay, this is an interesting but weird little game about riding a motorcycle during the apocalypse. Reviews to Go rates Girls Made Pudding for the Nintendo Switch a 6 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching and have a great day.